Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Google Learning webinars. And my name is Tanya LeClaire, and I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about feedback and assessment. First, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Tanya LeClaire. I'm a digital learning coach in Korea. I'm also a Google innovator, a Apple distinguished educator, and a tech consultant. And I love talking about all things virtual learning and educational technology. So today I wanted to talk with you about all the different ways that you can use blended learning approaches in feedback and assessment. And I know this is something that is constantly on our minds these days, where a lot of us are in the middle of different virtual learning situations. Perhaps it's a hybrid learning model, perhaps you're in class, and perhaps some of you are virtual learning from home. So hopefully what we talk about today can help you in your teaching. Before we get started, we'll just break down what assessment and a feedback are for today's purposes. So when speaking about assessment, it's the process of gathering data to better understand the strengths and weaknesses of student learning, and effective feedback enables the learner to reflect on their learning strategies, to confirm them, or to make changes to improve their learning. And feedback is so important in learning, and it's something that I hope we always consider feedback as assessment for learning, or a way that we can help improve student learning going forward. So one quote that I thought really resonated when I was looking at materials for today was a quote by Caitlin Tucker, who I think is a really awesome person to look at when you're thinking about blended learning. She's got some great books, and I do cite an article of hers in the resources for today. But it's when done well, feedback can strengthen the relationship that online teachers have with their students. And I think that couldn't be more true, considering a lot of us are experiencing a disconnect from students physically. We're not seeing them in the classroom. So the ways that we can utilize feedback in different forms of feedback can be really helpful in building and maintaining those relationships with students. So I thought that quote especially resonated with the way things are going right now with COVID and all the different situations we find ourselves in. So when we're thinking about feedback, I wanted to think about three main things we want to consider and always keep present when we are thinking about giving feedback and doing assessments. And that first thing is that a feedback is timely. We want to make sure that feedback is given immediately and often, and connected to performance increase. So what I mean by immediately and often is providing guidance when the assignment is still fresh in the student's mind. We don't want to have, an assessment we give or something the student's waiting on feedback so long that they even forget that they did it in the first place. So being timely is really important. Delivering feedback in a timely manner can sometimes be hard because we want to make sure that we're not overloading ourselves as well as teachers. So hopefully some of the strategies and the tools you'll get today will help you give that feedback in the time that you really want students to receive it in. Second thing to consider when giving effective feedback is that it's specific. So giving specific information on what's right or wrong and linking feedback to the learning objectives. Great feedback really does create a roadmap for students. You want them to know what objectives they were trying to meet, how that assessment or how that learning project, what that was and how that effectively met those objectives. And if they didn't meet them, what they might do to get there. So being really specific, always linking to those rubrics, to those objectives, and making sure students know where they came from, where they're at, and where they should be going next. And then the final one, kind of feeding on that specific topic, was actionable. So clearly stating what the student did well and the steps they can take for improvement. Are we actually laying out the steps that they took to get where they are, and how can they get to that next bit? How can they get to that next spot? Different students might fall in different places, especially for differentiating learning based on where students are at. So making sure you're talking specifically about where they are and what actions they might take to go to that next level of improvement, or what you want to see from them. And also getting students to think about how they might take action themselves, and based on your feedback, what things might they do next, and really conversing with students on what that could look like. So hopefully also the tools today will help you think about how to give students those next steps. So today's tools, this might look like a crazy amount of tools, but these are the tools I'm going to touch on today. I'm going to talk about different strategies for these tools tools. So some of the tools you might recognize here are Google Forms, Google Slides, Docs. One of the really popular tools these days is Screencastify because we're doing so many screencasts. So a couple of fun ones like Jiffy, for example, or Bitmoji. And then one we all probably know and love, Google Classroom. And then a few that may be new to you. And if they're not new to you, that's great too. Maybe it will be a strategy that you haven't used yet with this tool, or a different way that you may not have thought about using it. So let's get into some. I'm going to go through some of the ways that I use them and some of the different strategies. And then if we have time at the end, I'll do a few demos of some of the ones I wanted to show you in particular. If we run out of time, that's okay too. You're going to be left with a lot of resources and this presentation, and all of these are linked, and you can always get to that information after the fact. So let's go. The first one I want to talk about is Docs feedback tips. I know a lot of us are probably using Google Docs, especially in upper years. A lot of times we'll use Google Docs for numerous reasons: essays, pieces of writing, math, computations. So there's lots of different reasons we use it. But there are different ways we can use those comment boxes when we're using Docs. One of the things we don't always think about is using a comment box and being really specific with using the student's email inside of it to leave them feedback so that they get a notification in their email box. Sometimes it's easy just to highlight and write that feedback, but students won't know you've left it unless they look. So if you go and you write that feedback, and you @, them or you leave their email, they'll get that email notification, especially if it's a collaborative group. Sometimes notifications are set up differently and configured differently in inboxes. So the more specific you can be with leaving their name, the easier they will get to see it. And another thing I want you to think about is leaving links to resources, leaving links to rubrics, or perhaps leaving links to maybe other connected pieces of work that you're working on. And one of the easy ways to do that is hyperlinking it in that comment box. And you can do that really easily with the one-click shortener extension. I really love extensions and add-ons. And if you go to the Google Chrome Web Store, you can find extensions. And the one that I have featured on this slide called One-Click Shortener, it's really easy. If you're on a web page, it's right up in your top extension bar. You click it and it will immediately make a very nice shortened little link that you can pop into a comment box, and students can find that again really easily. It also gives you a QR code. So it's two different ways that you can get that information linked in there. And it's one of the ways that I really like to link to specific pieces of work or other resources, maybe even videos. So you can do lots of things with it. So those are a few of the different ways to use the comment box. Another great way to leave feedback is by leaving audio feedback. Now, audio feedback is wonderful because when you leave audio feedback, the student gets to hear your tone of voice, they get to hear how you're giving that feedback, and it really helps you connect a lot more with students. I find that audio feedback resonates with students a lot more than written feedback. And a couple of different ways you can do this. One of my favorite ways is with a Google Chrome extension called Mote. M-O-T-E. Once you install Mote, it kind of gives you that, it gives you a little play button. I feel like it's a play button or record button right in that comment box. So when you highlight within Google Docs and you want to leave Mote feedback, you can record it right there. You don't have to leave. And then it's saved within that document. Now, a student would need to have the extension for free. There's a freemium version. So there's free and there's paid. Now, a student can have that extension and they can play that right in the document. Or if they don't, they can click it and it will open up in a new tab and play for them. So it's a really quick, easy way for you to leave feedback. Another way is with a really quick site called Vocaru. I don't know the pronunciation, but it allows you to record audio really quickly and then just share it with a URL, with a link. And you can pop that link into a doc, you can pop that link into a comment box, and it's a really another easy way for you to leave feedback that's linked and easy to find. So those are two really great audio ways to leave feedback. Another way to leave audio, but also leave a few other things, called Kaizena, the Docs and Kaizena add-on approach. Kaizena is another freemium, so you can pay or you can have the free version. And it's an extension that you can add right into your docs. And you can leave targeted audio and written comments. You can also attach skills, rubrics, video, and it's just a sidebar that pops up right beside your docs, and you can see there in the picture what it looks like. If you leave feedback with Kaizena on the sidebar by leaving voice messages or what have you, and the students also have Kaizena, then they can see that feedback on their side, and I have a picture of what that looks like. So if a student sees their work and they see it highlighted, you can see that there's some audio feedback, there's some video feedback, and I know that a lot of times schools will have their technology departments will have the ability to kind of load those extensions all into their devices. So if you don't have Kaizena on student devices, you can either get them to upload the extension themselves, or you can have your school put that on devices too. And I know that this is a really popular one, and it's one to consider when you want to leave different types of multimodal feedback on one type of document. So Kaizena is another great one to consider. Another quote that I really liked, and I didn't want to leave without, but by giving students the responsibility to share their expertise with one another, we're engaging them in the highest level of learning by asking them to teach. And this leads me to some types of strategies to use with slides that also allow for peer feedback. And I know that a lot of us are using peer feedback, but I can't stress it enough how important it is to give students that opportunity to look at each other's work and give what they think is some positive feedback or things to work on. It's always really important to let students feel like they are the experts, that they know what they're talking about, and by doing that, they can learn even more themselves. So let's look at one of the ways that I really like to do that. One of the ways is called Slides Collaborative Deck, and I believe this was originally, I saw this in an Alice Keeler blog years ago, but I thought it was such a great idea, and I've actually paired this with a Pear deck template. Now, first I'll talk about what a collaborative deck is. A collaborative deck is when you take one slide deck and you make each slide the same depending on what it is that you're working on. For example, I have a Pear deck template here that's got the setting, the main characters, the problem. It's kind of breaking down the scene of a story. And what you do is you add each slide the exact same, and then you share that with your entire class, and you give each student one slide. So you could have the slides numbered, you'd have one student on slide 1, one student on slide 2, and that's where they put in their work. So they each have a slide to work on. And you can make a master slide to do this. For example, say you have downloaded a template from Pear Deck, and that's what I've done. Pear Deck's a great site. Pear Deck's an add-on where you can do kind of interactive, really awesome interactive slide presentations. Another one, there's just so many to consider. It's like you can't even get into them all. But on the Pear Deck website, you can get templates for numerous different topics, math, sciences, all sorts. This one was one of their English literature slide templates. And you can just download the image, you can insert it onto the slide, you can insert it on there so that it's locked as a master slide, and then students can write over it. So after you've shared that with the class, they know that they each have a slide to work on, and because they can see all those slides, you can give them another student to give feedback to. So not only can they work within a collaborative environment, you can see all their work right there, and they can see one another's work, which is really great. You know, it's awesome when they can see each other's work. It's awesome when they can gather ideas from one another, share their own ideas. And when I'm looking at that as a teacher, I like to look at it in the grid view. So in the bottom of the slide template area, on the left, you can see the grid view, and you can see all of the different slides that students are working on. Now, one of the ways that I want them to give feedback is on those slides, you know, where might they do this? So one idea for that is a slides feedback frame. If you didn't already know, the space around a Google slide, the gray area around it, you can leave stuff in there. You can put notes in there. You can put comments in there. So one of the things you might want to consider doing is putting a shape just on the outside of the slide that students are working on. And you can call that, I call it the feedback frame. There's lots of different names for them, but that's where peers can leave their feedback. So rather than leaving it on the slide, which might look messy, peers can leave their feedback right in that feedback frame. Now, you don't have to just use this area for feedback. As you can see my example here, and I've just got a math example, but you can leave notes from the teacher, you can leave strategies, you can leave hints for how they might complete their work. You can leave Bitmojis, which is where the Bitmojis come in. I love the Bitmoji extension. If you go to the Chrome Web Store, you can get the Bitmoji extension, and then you can just drag and drop Bitmojis. So I know some great teachers. This idea in particular I got from Todd Davis from Twitter, Toddy TD. He puts his Bitmojis on the outside of his slides in the gray area, and you can do that too. It's really fun, and it gives that connection as well. Like students will see their teacher in cartoon form. How fun is that? But they can do it too if you want them to leave their Bitmojis when they're leaving their peer feedback. That could be so much fun. So that's where you put the peer feedback frame. That's where you as a teacher can leave other notes and information or your own feedback in that gray area. So that space is valuable space. So think about using that in the future. So let's go to the next one. We're going to go into Google Classroom now. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Google Classroom last year, I believe a little bit over a year ago, they started Google Classroom rubrics. So when you're making an assignment in Google Classroom, you'll see a plus rubric button right at the bottom of that assignment creation. And that's where you can click to create your own rubric. You can reuse a rubric, or you can import a rubric from Sheets. And the creation of rubrics is super easy. When you're creating a rubric, all you need to do is you can call it a name, for example, criterion A, criterion B, if you're in the IB. You would put any of the information or questioning that you're going to be putting at the top. You can assign your own points, and then you would put in the levels of your rubric, and you can put them right in there, and it's super easy peasy, so not hard at all. And another thing I really like about Google Classroom rubrics is the ability to reuse a rubric. Now, this one's a game changer, because not only can you reuse your own rubrics, but if you are a co-teacher in a class, which I am, you can reuse the rubrics from those classes. And this is great when you're in a setting where you're working as a group with other teachers. You can work on rubrics together, or you can all split it up, and you can maybe, your other teacher does one rubric and you do the other, but because you're co-teaching in those classrooms, you can reuse those, and it's less work for you, which is great. And you can save those, you can keep them in archive classes, unarchive that class, reuse that rubric. It's such a great tool. And it's really great too, because when students are getting those assignments back, they can refer to those Google Classroom rubrics. So not only are you showing students where their objectives are, you're being specific and targeted, but you're also allowing for students to see that when they're receiving their feedback as well. So it's really making a nice back and forth with that feedback loop. So one thing to consider is Google Classroom rubrics. Another Google Classroom amazing feedback thing is the Google Classroom app. If you haven't used the Google Classroom app to give feedback, I highly recommend it. And you can find, for example, when you annotate within assignments, you just get that little pencil, you can click on it, and it'll let you annotate inside your assignments. Pardon this example, this was just me messing around with some text and some different equations. But really easy, you open up the assignment that a student's turned in, you click the little pencil. If you have a stylus, you can write all on top of it what your feedback is, and then you would save it, and it would upload as a PDF onto that assignment for the student to see your work given back to them. So easy. I love annotating on top of work, especially if you want to even record that as you're going, showing the students where they may have gone wrong or where they may want to improve, and also what they did well. It's such an easy thing to do, and it really does provide that extra level of kind of really fast feedback to students. So something that I love, and I know that I hope you love too. So Google Classroom app. Another amazing thing about Google Classroom are the comment tricks, but when you're going in to assess some work and you've left some comments, one thing you can do with Google Classroom, if you click those three dots, is you can link to a comment or add to comment bank. Keeping a comment bank in Google Classroom is invaluable, because a lot of times, especially if you're, if you have a lot of students, if you're a teacher from upper grades, you're doing a lot of the similar comments. And so if you're going to be doing that, you can add to the comment bank and you can refer to those comments again later on. One thing I loved in general about Google Apps and just apps really in general is the three dots are always where you find the good stuff. So when in doubt, look at the three dots in any app, and you're bound to find more tools, more tricks, or more things you can use to make things a little bit easier. And another, I know this is super random, but a really quick tip is when you're leaving comments on work, be it in Google Classroom, be it in Google Docs, if you use the little stars, the little asterisks, and then you put them on either side of a word, it bolds that comment. So that's another way to even give more specific feedback, because students will see those bolded words and know that those are important. So just another quick tip, I can't even speak, trick for you, but one that I found really interesting. And there are other formulas for that, but this is one that I thought I would just highlight today because I thought it was really neat. So there you go. Now, getting away from Google Classroom and going into screencasting feedback. Screencasting has become kind of a hot topic in virtual learning because it's one of the ways that we've been able to flip learning, blend our learning, that allows teachers to be ever present with students and make videos for them that can highlight a number of different methods of learning. So I love Screencastify, the extension Screencastify, and I love it because it allows you to save directly to Google Drive. It allows you to grab that shareable link when you're saving your work. And if you get the pro version, it allows you to do some editing right in there. So I highly recommend the Screencastify Chrome extension. You can get it in the Chrome Web Store. And yeah, there's just so much you can do even with the free version. And so one thing you might want to consider is screencasting yourself, giving feedback to the students. And you can use a number of different applications to do this. Sometimes, depending on what you're using, you might have markup features right on your tablet. If you are using a computer, you can use Kami, which is a great application. You can get Kami you can use the Kami website, and you can have it right on your computer. There's a free version and there's a paid version. They also have a free trial, but it gives you a lot of annotation tools on the side of what you're working with. So if you're giving feedback on a document, piece of written work, what have you, you can use their highlight tool, you can use their markup tool, and you can give that feedback during a screencast, which allows students to see your face, hear your voice, and see what you're giving feedback to. Another great thing to use would be Google Jamboard to give that feedback. Jamboard is just like a big, whiteboard that you can use. So you can give feedback on work they've done in Jamboard, really you name it. But screencasting yourself while you're giving feedback, gives that extra layer of personability to it. And again, if students are at home, they're learning online, they're in the middle of virtual learning, it's a great way for you to connect with them too. So, and also another thing I like about Screencast too is students can replay what you're saying. If you give them a screencast video, and you're making it personal for them, maybe they want to replay what you're saying, maybe they want to watch it more than one time. It really does allow them to take their time and absorb what you're saying and go back to it later on if they need to. So that's another thing I really like screencasting for. So let's go to the next one. So Google Forms. I know a lot of us love Google Forms. But we don't always get to explore all the great things that Google Forms can do. So when you're thinking about Google Forms for assessments, and you really are thinking about using Chromebooks, this is a great, great tool. One thing you can do is you can make your Google form a quiz, and then in Chromebooks, and this is special for Chromebooks, you can put it in lock mode. So you can lock the quiz so that when kids are taking them, they can't scroll into other websites, they can't go into any other apps, and this is in managed Chromebooks. So this is such a great way to keep kids on task, keep them from maybe going somewhere they shouldn't, and maybe checking out things they shouldn't during a quiz. And it's such a great tool for those of you using Chromebooks. Highly recommend that one. Another great tip for Google Forms is branching. I really like using this. So for example, say you're making a Google form and you make a question, and then depending on what a student answers, you want them to go one of two ways or three ways. So this allows you to really differentiate learning. So for example, a student gets a question wrong, it might take them to a new piece of information or a new question that can help them get to the place they need to be. And if they get it right, and maybe it's, too easy for them, they can go to an even harder question next time. So it allows you to branch that information and really differentiate those Google Forms assessments in a way that can be beneficial for your students. So definitely something to check out. And that is in the 3 dots. Again, magical 3 dots. When you're in Google Forms, that's where you can find that go-to section based on answer, and it allows you to branch off those questions. So definitely something to check out. And then the next one is Google Forms feedback. When you are giving questions in a quiz, you can say add answer feedback, and depending on the type of answer a student gives, you can give them feedback for incorrect or correct answers. So say they get an incorrect question incorrect, you can give them feedback that can encourage them for next time, that can help them get to the place where they understand, or give them information they might need to continue with the quiz. Or for correct answers, you can give them encouragement and more information that might help them along the way as they go. So giving feedback embedded within those assessments, that's another great way that Google allows you to really differentiate and add that extra layer of personal touch to your feedback. So another great tip. Now moving on to another tool. This tool is called Socrative, and I really like Socrative because it allows you to give real-time results when you are giving assessments or questions or exit tickets to students. You name it, it kind of gives you a couple of different ways to get information from students. So if you go to Socrative and you just type it in Google, you'll find it there. You can make any number of assessments or little quick quizzes that you like, and then you can assign students to take the quiz. You can assign them to write an exit ticket. You can do multiple choice, true and false, short answer. And then one of the ones I really like is called Space Race. So I'll show you that in a second. But you can allow kids to give instant answers or questions, answers to your questions. You can allow them to go at a teacher's pace, or you can allow them to go at their own pace. And you can see from this picture here, you get a couple of different ways to make it your own. And then one of the ones I really like is called Space Race. So for example, say you have some questions, and based on those questions, if they're right or wrong, this little spaceship will move on the screen. You can show this to students in real time so they can see. And one of the neat things you can do is you can get students to either choose their own rocket team, so based on color, or you can give them a rocket team. So if you have, say, 4 students in blue, 4 students in lime, 4 students in violet, they all know they're working as a team to answer those questions, and they see their little rocket ship going on the screen, and it's such a fun way to get them to work together on achieving a goal. So what a fun way to do short assessments and give students feedback in real time. And then as a teacher, you get that dashboard with all the information afterwards too. So it's really helpful for you in collecting quick bits of information for those perhaps formative assessments that you're doing. So Socrative is a fun tool and definitely one to check out. The next one is great for peer feedback. I don't know if you've utilized this one yet, but it's one of my favorites, and it's called Peergrade. It works probably a little better for middle and upper school students. But what it does is it allows students the ability to give peer feedback on one another's submissions, and then teachers can track those comments and progress. So for example, you can get students to submit. So you've been invited to a peer grade course. This is an example of what it looks like on a Google Classroom invitation. So a student will click into this, they would upload their work. So say it's a piece of writing or what have you, and that submission would be open till a certain time. So they'd have a certain time limit to submit their work. And then once that's closed, then it's time for them to go in and give feedback on their peers' work. So it says feedback open. So students, Peergrade automatically does this. Students will see who they should give feedback to. They can leave it there in little boxes. So I'm going to go back, sorry. They can leave it there in the little boxes it gives you. And then when that feedback period is closed, it gives the feedback to the students. So really it allows you to submit, allows peers to give one another feedback, and then it gives that feedback back to students. So it's a full loop, and then teachers can track it from the inside. So there's a free trial with that one as well, but Peergrade is not super expensive. It's quite reasonable. So it's definitely one to check out if you've got a little bit older students and you want them to give feedback to one another. And another thing I would suggest if you're doing this is to give your students feedback routines. So give them questions that they should be asking themselves and one another. Give them methods for which they might leave that feedback. So I know that when I used to work with younger kids, we'd give 2 stars and a wish. So you'd have the younger kids, if they're giving feedback to their peers, say 2 great things and 1 thing they wish they might do next time. And you can parlay that into older kids too. You can say, okay, let's give feedback on 2 things that you thought they did really well based on the rubric criteria or what the objectives are, and then something you think they might need to work on and why. So coaching students on how they can leave really valuable and useful feedback is a great routine to have, and it's something, especially with a tool like this, that you're going to want to implement in your classroom so that they're not just going, great job. I'm sure we've all seen students leave like, hey, good work, great job. They're not thinking about why they're giving that feedback, what that feedback means to the other student, and how that feedback is useful. So as teachers, it's important to leave really meaningful feedback, but teaching our students how to do that too, and that can help them. That can help them in their own work. So something to consider if you're using a tool like Peergrade. So I know you saw a little preview of this, but we'll go to the next one. And this is one of my favorite tools, Go Formative or Formative. It's called goformative.com, but Formative. It's one of my favorite tools for creating really interesting ways of students giving feedback, or sorry, not giving ways of students doing their work or giving you work to look at, and then really interesting ways for teachers to give feedback. So for example, if you're at Formative and they've got a free version and a paid version, so you go to goformative.com and you're allowed to create all sorts of content. You're allowed to create quizzes, essays. You're allowed to create all sorts of question types, multiple choice, you name it. So you would make a quiz or an assessment, and then you would give that code that it gives you to students, and then they can go in and complete that, and you can see live visible results right there. And I'll show you what that looks like. So they call them formatives. So you give that to students, and then as they're answering those questions, as they're filling out the information, you would see that work happening right on your screen in real time, and it gives you all the data that you're going to need based on what your assessment is. So it's really, not only is it great for students because it gives them so many different ways to leave feedback. You can leave audio, you can leave video, there's all sorts of different ways. So it gives students numerous ways to do their work, but it also feeds back to teachers in really fast, manageable, and comprehensive ways. So you can get all of that data. And I mean, that's so useful as a teacher. Sometimes we have to mark so much. We have so much on our plates that having tools that allow us to really utilize that time and be creative, it's just invaluable. And another great thing about Formative is it gives you the ability to do these multiple different kinds of assessments when kids are at home, no matter what device they're using, and it comes to you in a really short amount of time. So I really love using Formative. One of the great things that Formative has is the ability for you to give students little whiteboards. So students, not only can they submit work to you written, they can submit it numerical, they can do equations, but they can also use a tablet and a stylus to give their feedback, or sorry, not give their feedback. The word feedback is just in my head. They're allowed to do their work in a whiteboard fashion too, and you kind of see them all on the screen at once, which is really, really fun. So I love Formative. It allows you to go and view those responses right away, and also it can hide the names. So for example, say you want to play this screen for students as they're answering questions, you can hide those names and they can see what students are answering. I know a lot of teachers who like to use this with younger students, and they'll have the dashboard showing all the answers on the board and hide those names so students can see what other students are doing without the stigma of being embarrassed by maybe what they did or being self-conscious. So it's a great tool for you to get the work, give the feedback, and also show students how they might be doing as well. So if you haven't checked out Formative, that's definitely one to consider for numerous different subjects. So I love using it, and I think you would love it as well. The next one, and I love this tool so much, it's called Mentee Meter, and I actually use Mentee Meter when I do professional development, when I do staff meetings, because it's a way for you to give interactive questions and get those answers in real time right on your screen, and then give you a couple of cool ways to do it. So you can use Mentee Meter for free. You get a certain amount of slides and questions, and it's like you're making a slide deck, basically. You can get introduction slides where there's nothing on it at all, but then the next slide can have a question. And whoever's answering those questions on their devices, say it's a computer or a phone or anything like that, they can just go to Mentee, I think it's mentee.com, and they put in the code that you give them, and then they can answer those right there. And then on your screen, it will show up right away. And one of the things I love to use Mentee with is a word cloud. So if you want to ask a question and you want to get students to give you one-word answers, maybe it's how they're feeling today. Maybe it's what word this math concept makes you think of. Maybe it's a word that piece of literature makes them think of. But it's a way to get them thinking. It's a way for you to get feedback from your students on how they might be feeling. That's another really good way to use it, and get it back in real time in a way that's super useful for both you and students. So using Mentimeter as an interactive instant question and answer tool, and you can use, like, there's a survey method, there's WordCloud, there's lots of different ways that you can show that, but it gives you that really great graphic visual to show students how they might be answering the questions as well. So I love it. So that brings us to a bit of a recap. I know I've fed you a couple of different things in this in the last 35 minutes or so, and I hope it wasn't too fast, but let's just recap what we thought about today. We want to think about keeping feedback timely, specific, and actionable. And in order to do that, you want to utilize tools that provide multimodal feedback options. So that's audio, that's video, that's written, that's all sorts of different ways to interact and appeal to students' different ways of understanding. So, I think by using some of the tools today, you really can achieve all of those. You also want to give students the opportunities for peer feedback, because teaching is one of the greatest ways we can learn, and if we can utilize students in our feedback process, that's all the better. So hopefully tools like Peergrade, hopefully tools like the slides frame can really help you do that in your classroom. And then feedback routines help everyone stay organized and purposeful. So thinking back on feedback routines as in thinking of the questions you might prompt students with that they can ask one another, ways in which you might ask them to provide peer feedback, and also routines for yourself. What are students expecting from you? Are you utilizing tools over and over again so that they come to expect those tools, come to understand how they might work, and also use them themselves? So being routine as a teacher, not in a boring way, but in a way that's really purposeful. Maybe you use Formative quite a bit in your classroom so that students know that tool, they come to expect it, they know how to use it. Or maybe you use the feedback frames and slides enough that students are like, oh, okay, this is what I do. It's not something where you're like, oh, I'm just going to use the same stuff all the time, but you want to be purposeful with what you use, and you don't want to overload students. So being routine as a teacher in that sense, but also being routine in what you ask of students in how they give peer feedback, and making that something you do often so that they can come to expect it. That's what we mean by feedback routines, and helping everyone stay organized and purposeful. Now, I'm going to be giving you some resources and image citations here that I'll give you at the end, but for now, I might guide you through a few demos. So, okay, so I want to show you a few other things now that we have a little bit of time left. And the first one is the Pear Deck templates. I mentioned those briefly before, but I just want to show you where to get those. It's peardeck.com/templates. And if you go in here, you can see that they have a lot to choose from. And I know that these work with all different age levels, and they give you the ability to download them in Google Slides or PowerPoint. So I'll just show you how to do that. So here's some great ones: the Pear Deck templates on deepening instructional practice, discussing hard topics, you name it. I think the one that I showed you was an English language template, Pear Deck templates for ELA. But let's just look at, for example, some of the math ones here, and you can just kind of go through and check them out. So I want to download this in Google Slides, so I'm going to click Google Slides and make a copy, and it just prompts me to make a copy right away. So let's do that. And as soon as I click make a copy, it will open up, and easy as that. Now, if you want to use the approach where you have one slide that you use over and over again in a collaborative slides template, what you can do is you can go to File, and you can download one of the slides as a PNG. So for example, let's look through. Say I have a slide that I would like students to work on. And Pear Deck allows things to be a bit interactive, but maybe I won't use it for that this time. So say I want to make this a slide where where students can use it. We can copy that slide and we can paste it. We can paste it again, we can paste it again, and you name it, you can keep going, and then you can delete the other slides. And then you have one slide deck full of the same slide for students to use and give feedback on. Now, say students have done their work and you want them to use that gray space to give feedback to one another. So you can just make that a little bit smaller. Let's say we're going to go down and make that a little bit smaller. And then what you can do is go up to shape, and you can insert that shape. And this is where you can have your feedback frame. Now I made mine look like a picture frame, so I can go up here and I can go and I can actually choose the picture frame if I want to. Down here, make it any color you like. And now you can copy and you can paste that onto other slides so that you have that feedback frame in the same place. Or if you take this, let's see, we're going to take this slide that we're on, copy it, paste it, and if I go to the next one, that feedback frame is still there. So you don't really have to do it over and over again. You can do it once, and then you have the feedback frame there, and then students know that that's where they can go to leave that feedback. Now, I told you that I inserted the Bitmoji, so I'll show you what I did for that. Up here, you can see on my screen that I have the Bitmoji extension. If I click that, I am given my Bitmoji, and I created my Bitmojis before on the Bitmoji app, so you do have to do that. But then you can go down and say you have one that you'd like, to put into your slide deck. So you can just take it and you can drag it in, and then that Bitmoji is right inside your gray space so that students can see it, which is kind of fun. And all I did to get that Bitmoji extension was I went to the Chrome Web Store, and we can search any of the tools we talked about today that were available in the web store. You would just go in here and you would install it. Now I already have it installed, so it doesn't say installed, but that's what it would say there. The other extensions that we talked about today, there was Moat. You can go and you can click on Moat. You can get Moat right there. And I also saw one of the other ones we worked with called Cami, and you can get Cami there as well. So Chrome Web Store, it's a treasure chest. It's a place where you can go and you can get all the things that you need. So I highly recommend going in there and checking those things out. Now, another one of the tools that I really wanted to touch on was Go Formative. Now, I have just a free account right in here, and I want to show you what it's like to create a new formative. And what I mean by formative is a new assessment. So I'm going to create a new formative, and I just made a free account. And if you go in here, you can see that it gives you all sorts of ways to choose questions. Now you'll see that they do give you the ability to do a 30-day free trial if you want to try the pro, but you can see how some things are grayed out and some things are available. So for example, you can go up and you can say, I'd like students to complete a multiple choice question. You can type in your question. Of course, this is not a very hardcore assessment here. How are you today? Let's type in the option, I'm great. I'm just okay, and so on. So obviously, this is not an assessment. Then you would check the correct one, I'm great. You can randomize the order. Oh, sorry, that one's only if you have the pro version. Little stars mean pro. Anyway, then you go to plus to create your new question. Now, you can also tag standards, which I think is really cool. So if you're actually working with certain standards, you can go in and you can add your own standard set as well, which is really useful. So if you're going to be tracking those standards, let's say I want to add that one, and I'll just keep going. Oh my, confirm and exit. So then I can go and I can click the plus, and let's add another one. Maybe we want students to show their work. We can say show your work, and we can say draw your feelings today. And then we can add another question. And you know what? You could go on forever, but let's just do a multiple selection. Choose the right answer. I'm not getting into the greatest questions today, am I? Just giving you an idea. This, or this. Oh, What a brain buster. Okay, so then what you would do is you would go to assign. And this is great because it connects you right to Google Classroom. So you can go to assign, and I have just a testing class that I've assigned to before. You can add a new class. You can add students right in here if you want, but I really like using Google Classroom. I can assign and post to Google, or I can assign only. So if you post to Google, that will go right to your Google Classroom assignments, or I can assign only. And then all I need to do is get students to go to goformative.com, and they can click on the name. Now, I haven't named it. It's just called Untitled Formative 14, but they can click on that, and then they can start working. So then you say, okay, and then as you're working, as students are working, you can view their responses coming in right away, which is great. So that's another tool that I really love to use, and one that I hope that you love to use too. So another one of the tools that I wanted to show you now that we've got a little bit of time left is Mentee Meter. And Mentee Meter is a great tool for instant feedback, and it gives the ability for students to see that feedback in real time as well. So I'm just at mentimeter.com, and I've already made a free account. So I'm going to go into your presentations to access my dashboard. And on the dashboard, you can see previous mentees that I've made, and then I can see where I want to make a new presentation. Now, I call them mentees because I've seen them being referred to on the site like that. But one thing I really like also about Mentee Meter is it gives you inspiration. So if you go to inspiration on the left-hand side, you can see that there's inspiration for teachers and students. So you can see that there's different Mentee Meter presentations already been given, climate change, renewable resources, formative assessments, and so on. So let's just choose one. I'm going to choose weekly student reflection session, and I'm going to add that to my presentations. So it's added. So if I go to my presentations now, I can see that that's there, and I'll click on it, and it will show me what that looks like from the back end. So it just gives me that back end where I can add more slides. I can edit what's already there, which is great. So you can see there's 2 slides in this, and this is very much like a slideshow creator Mentimeter in the back. You've got your slides on the left, and you've got your content on the right-hand side that you can add in. So the first slide is a question. Based on last week, rate the following, and you can see here that I've got the question, and then I've got the statements. And that's where students can choose where they strongly agree or disagree. Another slide that I've got already is, do you have any reflections from the week you want to share? And this question is speech bubbles, which is really fun. So when students answer, their work will be a bunch of speech bubbles on the screen, which I like. You can also choose down here to let participants submit multiple answers. So that's really great for them if they want to add more than one, which is pretty awesome. You can make this a flowing grid as well, where the information will kind of flow down on the screen. You can see as people put more answers, it'll come at the top. You can see that working there. I love that Mentee Meter gives you that preview of what that might look like later, so that's pretty cool. Another thing you can do up here is you can go and you can find more examples on the left-hand side at the top. You can see that there are other examples of different kinds of questions. If we click on education, we can see that there are some other fun ones. Which picture shows the liver? Oh, that's interesting. So what comes to mind when you hear the phrase enthusiastic consent? Okay, cool. What is a nocturnal animal? So there's lots of different questions. It might just be the inspiration or in how the questions are asked. So I can click add this slide if I upgraded, but for now it just gives me what they might look like. So we'll go back, and then I can also go to themes, and I can customize the look and feel of my Mentee Meter presentation. So I'm going to make this one a dark theme. I like the dark. And now I want to add another slide. So I'm going to go add slide. And this is where I can choose the type of slide I'd like to add. So I can add a multiple choice, a word cloud. Now it gives you some limitations in the free examples. So I've already added a few different types. So the ones that are available to me will pop up. So I'm going to go to maybe a Q&A, and I'm just going to say, here's my question, ask me anything, or what are your expectations? I can say, these are like previous questions I put in. So what is the best way for you to learn? And then I can say if I want to customize these a little bit more. Then I can go up and I can add one more slide, and this is where you might want to add content slides, so images, video, words, different kind of things. So for example, let's say if I want to add a video, I can put it in there, and then I would just add my YouTube URL in there. So that's pretty cool. You can also give students the ability to add reactions, which may or may not be something you want to do. And then as soon as you're ready to present, you just go up to the first slide, and I'm going to click present. And that's when it shows the screen that the students will see and that you see. And right now, I don't actually have my joining information on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out, and I'm going to make sure my joining information is on the screen. So I'm going to go back, and let's see, I'm going to go down to the bottom, or I'm going to go to customize. Okay, so you can see here in customize, it said hide instructions bar. I don't want to hide that. I want to keep that at the top. You can see how it goes away and comes back when I click that. Now I'm going to go present. And if I scroll away, you can see that students need to go to mentee.com and use the code. So I'm actually going to do that right now to show you what that looks like. I'm going to go on my own device to mentee.com, and I'm going to put in the code. That is 6821862, 6821. And once I'm in, I have the questions on my device, and I'm just going to answer those. And this is like a little rating scale, so you can see there. So I'm going to go and start rating. And as I do it, you should see this update on your screen. Submit. So I'm submitting, and there you go. There are my answers. Now, this is great for students seeing this in real time. It's awesome. And so if I go to the next slide as a teacher, the next slide automatically shows up on my device. And so I can say my reflection, I love the class. And then I can submit that right away, and that shows up right away. So Mentee.com is super interesting because you can see that feedback right away. There's lots of different ways that students can react, that students can share, and that you can collect real-time feedback. So what a fun way. So that's Mentimeter.com. And one more of the tools that I featured that I thought you might like to look at a little bit is Peergrade. So I made an account on Peergrade, and I'm doing the free trial currently, and I'm just in the dashboard for that. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to say create assignment. And when I go create assignment, I can just put in some information here, test. I'm not going to put any text in here, but that's where you would put your assignment, and you can upload files and such as well. Then when you would go next, and this is where you can edit what you want the prompts to be for students. So mention something your classmate did well, mention something your classmate could improve at, add feedback question, can you identify how they achieved rubric point 1, whatever thing you'd like to put in here. If you want to really attach that to the objectives, you can do that. And you can get into scaling or whatever, you name it. So you can add those there, and then you would go next. Now you can just do a live session, continuous flow without deadlines. You can assign for homework, or you can create a custom, and that's where you can create dates and things like that's coming soon. So we'll just make this homework. So we're going to select that. So submission period begins. This is where you add the deadline for students submitting their work. So let's say October 8th, okay. And we're going to add the review period beginning. So student submission period ends October 8th. You can make the period maybe the 9th or any time thereafter, and that's what you can adjust here, and then you would just create this assignment. Now, you can see this is your dashboard, and this is where you can see where we're at. So submissions opened, submission closes this day, feedback opens this day and then feedback closes this day. And as students start to submit feedback, you would see their submissions right in this space right here. You can always edit the dates. I tried it where I signed peer grade work and then I edited the dates during that time and then it just adjusted. So it was totally fine. And you can post this right to Google Classroom as well, which is awesome. So if I have my work here, I have test, I can go to participants. I can see my participants. Now I've already used these here, but these are just my fake students that I use, but I can go to invite participants. I can share to Google Classroom. I can invite teachers one by one or students and teachers one by one, and I can use the class code. It also gives you a great summary after the fact. So it shows you how many submissions they've completed, how many reviews they completed, are there any reactions to those? So it gives you a lot of data as well. So that's why I really like Peergrade. Not only does it facilitate an easy way to gather peer feedback, but it also gives you the data you need as a teacher. So you can do those assessments that are really data-driven later on. So those are just a few of the tools I wanted to show you and how they work. I hope that you're taking away some interesting information today and that you are going to leave with some ideas for your own classroom. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that I get to communicate with you soon. You can always find me